Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Merrifield's Gardening Advisor. David and I are with you today, and we were just saying it seems a little strange just to have the two of us sitting here. We've had guests
been
the
one
last
of us,
couple
the
weeks.
other of us, guests.
I know, and then Peggy was on last week with her wonderful guest. And
well, it's fun kind of switching roles
I
around
know
like
it
that.
is. Like to keep it, mixed up.
Right. And you did have a good time.
I had a great time. We were in Florida, got a little time with the family, and it was did the Disney parks, and it was great.
Yeah, as he said, now it's time to recover.
That's right. That's right. I need a vacation from my vacation.
Right.
Well, we've got a great show for you today because spring is right around the corner. I mean, here we are the last weekend of February. Hard to believe. Spring just a few short weeks away. So today we're going to help you get started with some basic gardening ideas.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's been so cold and dreary out there, it's hard to think that it is. But like I said, that spring's coming right up. And we recognize that, hey, you know what? There's a lot of people that maybe are new to gardening, a lot of people that are new to the area, or even if you're an experienced gardener, it certainly doesn't hurt to kind of review the basics. As Debbie said, we thought just before we get into the spring season, before you start on a new gardening projects, we want to go over the things that I think are absolutely critical to being successful in your garden. So we're going to talk about things like drainage, soil preparation, the plant selection, planting, watering, all the things that you need to really have a beautiful garden and enjoy it for the years ahead. So stay tuned with us through the whole program. Of course, at the end of the show, we'll be taking your phone calls if you have any questions.
Great. Well, before we get started, I wanted to let you know what's happening at Merrifield Garden Center this weekend. And of course, our seminars continue. And we have had some great seminars and great response. We appreciate that. Today, 3 wonderful ones as well. Our first one is at the Merrifield location, Walls, Walks, and Patios. That's at the Merrifield Community Hall right next to our Merrifield location at Gallows Road and Lee Highway, 10 a.m. And that's going to be, I've got my wrong thing here.
That's Renata teaching that class.
Renata's teaching that one, that's right. I got my little booklet here and I'm looking at the wrong dates here. There we go. So again, if you want to do something this spring, this summer, this fall, anytime, adding some great hardscapes, this is a perfect opportunity for you to learn more about that. So come and listen to Renata's presentation. She was on a couple weeks ago, and you got a little taste of this, but it's great.
Yeah. And it's nice here because you can have the question and answer, the dialogue, and I think she was going to put a little more emphasis, she said, on the materials that you can use, and maybe we'll even have some samples of that.
And I think they've got some new things to show too. They were saying some of the new things that are out this year. So, at our Fair Oaks location, as we mentioned, Peggy last week had her wonderful guest Lou Mazzatenta, who's a photographer, and it was on garden photography. So if you enjoyed that or if you missed it, we've got a great opportunity at our Fair Oaks location today at 10 a.m. to continue that. He's going to be able to show you even more photographs and more tips on taking garden photography. So it's a great opportunity to see that. And at our Gainesville location, Designing Gardens with Color. Mary Kirk Menifee, one of our wonderful landscape designers, is going to be doing that. So it's a perfect time to figure out what colors you can add to your garden this spring and summer and to really enhance your garden. So that's at 10 a.m. at the Gainesville location. And then again, next week we have 3 great topics coming up as well: garden design, basics of pruning, and terrariums. So lots of different variety in there. As always, you can go to our website, merrifieldgardencenter.com, to get the entire schedule, or stop by and pick up one of the seminar schedules. We've still got plenty of those available. Some great ideas in here as well. So lots going on as always. I think that's all of our announcements today.
That's it. But like I said, these seminars, when it is the winter time, you maybe can't be out actively gardening. It's great. You come in, you get the inspiration, the ideas. I say doing your homework, so you're already set to go.
Right.
So you definitely want to take advantage of these classes.
Right. Well, before we get started, you have a couple of plants to show us today.
I do, and as we always talk about, we want a garden to look beautiful at all times of the year. And it's difficult to think about flowers and blooms and color, but there are some things that bloom in the wintertime. That is, we're in this February going to March bloom period. That is their normal bloom cycle. So I know some people are seeing like cherries and things popping out and starting to bloom now because of some of the warm weather, but these are plants that you can expect to find blooming out in your garden. So we're looking at right there is the witch hazel. Witch hazel, we talk about that a lot because it's one of my favorite plants. It's actually what I have planted in my front yard when I was putting a new garden in. It's a large shrub, small tree kind of thing, depending a little bit on how you train it. They come in a variety of colors. You're looking at the yellow right there, but that's a variety called Arnold's Promise, but you can also get sort of coppery colors in there. So you've got choice of colors. There's not quite a red, but they're even trying to work towards a red. It will grow to be about 15, 20 feet tall at maturity, and about maybe 10, 12 feet wide. So like I say, you can prune it to small tree or large shrub.
And that's the one in the front that you're seeing there. You're kind of seeing two plants there.
Exactly. So that one in the foreground is the witch hazel that we're talking about. Now, kind of behind it, you're getting a close-up on that, is one that's called winter jasmine. You can see this is really best used, I think, as it's trailing or weeping over a wall or along a staircase. Sometimes they're used on steep hillsides where you might have sort of an erosion situation and you don't want to go in there and mow. So it's a shrub that's going to max out at about 2, maybe 3 feet tall, but it spreads and it cascades down. And one of the things that's really nice on there is, in addition to the yellow flowers that are opening right now, is those stems are dark green and they're evergreen. So even in the wintertime, when there are no leaves and no blossoms on there, those stems almost give an evergreen appearance. So the flowers, they open sporadically throughout February, March. The leaves start coming out on this thing in April. So you go through the summertime, like I said, just that nice green foliage, and then those leaves fade off, giving you the stems of foliage on there, and then the flowers. And there's even a slight fragrance to it. So that is a tough, durable, low shrub that is flowering in landscapes right now. So I'm saying you can have flowers in the wintertime. Now you're seeing a close-up of the hellebores. This is a evergreen perennial. It's an herbaceous plant, so it doesn't form a woody stem or structure, but we're talking about, you know, anywhere from 12 to 24 inches tall, and these clumps, they get bigger and bigger each year. This does best in the shade in a nice woodland environment. They were doing a lot of work with these, starting to come out with a variety of different colors, and one of the things that everybody really likes about it is that it's deer resistant. Now I've found myself that I think that's a plant, it takes a little time to really establish itself in the garden. I've planted them in 3 different gardens, and it seems like about the 2nd, 3rd year after it's in the ground is when it really starts to flourish and look its best. But if you have a little bit of patience with it, that's great, very long-lasting flowers. Those flowers will hold up, you know, all the way well through April time period.
Such a nice spring opener, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So you get the flowers, and then, like I said, that foliage even through the winter time gives you a little interest.
And one more.
Yeah, I brought this other one. This is, I'm going to say, somewhat new plant to our landscape. It was really just started, it was introduced probably about 10 years ago. It's called Edgeworthia. It's originally native to China, but it's brought over here. It grows into a large shrub, or medium-sized shrub, you know, anywhere from about 6 to 8 feet tall, 6 to 8 feet wide. The thing I was a little questionable about was how well it would do in its winter hardiness, but we've been selling them for at least 3 years out of the garden center, so they've been surviving the winters here. So I feel pretty confident about it as far as its ability to survive in our climate, but still I think I would put it in a little bit of a protected location. Maybe not the most heat and drought tolerant plant, but where it gets a little bit of light shade and maybe just a little protection from cold, drying winter winds. But what's really neat about this is the buds on there hang like these sort of silvery, silky buds all through the winter time. So the buds themselves hang on there, and they're really nice. And then now, this time of year, again, February going to March, the flowers actually start to open, and they elongate in these little tubular blossoms. They have a nice perfumed fragrance to it. And of course, they're flowering before any leaves grow out, so they kind of stand out. And you can see that thick stem on there, so it's got a distinctive kind of structure to it. Member of the Daphne family, and then it gets a large coarse leaf through the summertime, and then of course the winter is its primary season of interest.
That's great. And as David said, there are things blooming now, so you know, it's a great time to get some of these things in that you're not used to, something new to your garden. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got some great ideas for you for some gardening basics. Welcome back. We're talking about some gardening basics today on our show, and because spring is right around the corner, so we want to help you get started. And Mother Nature kind of puts some things in front of us that we have to deal with, and one of those is drainage. So let's get started with drainage.
Right, and that's the whole thing with a landscape design, is you're working with the elements, of the drainage and the sunlight, the wind, and well as the needs of the plants, but you're trying to create a room. You want to create an environment and create a room, but it also needs to fit the environment that's there. So as Debbie was mentioning, for me, the number one thing when I'm looking at a new landscape project or creating a whole landscape, I begin by looking really at the drainage. I think that's the most critical thing, because all the time where I see problems are that sometimes that drainage comes as an afterthought, where then you're back trying to correct a problem that really needs to be addressed from the very beginning. So I brought in a couple examples, and I want to show you a picture of a very nice landscape. And this is what I talk about creating an outdoor room. This is a family that have young children, as well as they like to entertain. So you can see they have the deck area and their backyard. They wanted to connect a deck to a patio. They gave them plenty of useful area out there. It came out beautiful. This is talking about creating an outdoor room. So you could follow the steps down onto the flagstone walk, and that leads you over to a beautiful patio that we'll see coming up here, a little closer look, where that patio creates a nice environment to sit outdoors and enjoy yourself. Now, the thing is, this garden, this property, is right at the edge of a floodplain. Not far beyond this picture is 4 Mile Run, and when the rainstorms come, we have these heavy periods of rainfall and stuff, it doesn't come up to the house, but it comes into the garden, into the yard, and that's sort of a soggy mess that's out there. Or let me say, it was. So one of the things that I liked about this garden, it shows not only is it beautiful, functional, useful, but from the very beginning, from the very start, the landscape architect, Victor Burdell, used to work with us. He's retired now, but again, this is all Merrifield work. Went in, and he had to work with the grade and the drainage that was there. So we have to have that water moving away from the house, off the patio, and back into 4 Mile Run. So the projects, if you're doing something extensive like this, of course it begins with the construction aspects of it. And again, Renetta will be teaching a class on that at our Merrifield store if you can stop by there. So you can see the guys here, they've put this seat wall up, they've worked the walkway in, they're working on the patio. All the grades have been set, and even this patio has a little bit of a slight pitch to it to make sure that there's no water that's going to stand behind there. So the drainage is paramount to this. That's factored in from the very beginning. And as this patio is being built, the next phase of this construction really is this dry stream bed. And what I'm trying to show here is this is done with the drainages allowed from the very beginnings of this design. This was not put in as an afterthought. That water was accommodated for and allowed for, because it's going to come. And this is what I'm trying to say is, sometimes people say, oh, I have too much water, I'm just going to try to block it up. Well, that doesn't work.
Not a good idea.
No, it's going to be there, water from your roof, your downspouts, surrounding area, creeks, so you have to accommodate it. This actually has underground, it has a French drain built into sort of a drain pipe. Over top of it, we overlaid this dry stream bed, so it's able to move quite a bit of water out there. But it's actually been made a central feature of that garden, so it's something that's actually pretty and attractive to look at. And then the plant selection is also mating according to that. Things like the sedges that are put around there, that looks kind of like a liriope or sort of a grassy looking thing. That's actually does well in moist environments. You can barely see it in the corner of the picture, but there's an oak leaf hydrangea. So then the plants were selected also to fit into that environment. Now the next picture that we're looking at, this is an area that just simply doesn't drain. It's along Piney Branch, another stream valley, actually very close to our garden center. Again, this area does flood periodically, and when the waters come up, there's nowhere for it to go. And a lot of times these flat areas, flat locations, are the most difficult to work with. So what we are able to do, and this is a naturalized area, it's not a formal garden, it's sort of a stream bank restoration thing, but here you can see the stepping stones actually allow you to get through there even though it might be muddy. You can see there's some puddles in there, but the plant selection, you have things like the sweet bay magnolia, the winterberry, turtle heads, a perennial in there with the pink flowers. These are all plants that will tolerate and grow in a poorly drained environment. So again, this is what I keep talking about. You have to work this out from the very beginning, where either you're going to change the environment or you're going to be changing your plant selection to ones that will adapt to that.
Right.
Because if you don't, this is what happens.
And that's not pretty.
No, it's not pretty at all. Again, they were using a densiforma yew, Japanese yew, which is a very nice evergreen, forms a nice hedge. You use it to sort of create that outdoor room. But here, the homeowner, he did a nice job of planting, but he put the plants in the drainage swale where water collects. This is a plant that will not tolerate those conditions. The roots drown, the plants are dead. You know, it's back to square one.
Well, and that's what's nice about our landscape design team, because they know what needs to be done to correct that. As you said, at the very beginning, you're starting with that, and then you've got a beautiful landscape.
Right, because there is no way to correct that problem after the fact. It's just start over.
Right. Okay, we're going to take a quick break and come back with some more ideas. Stay tuned. Hi, we're talking about gardening basics today. We just talked about drainage in the last segment, and now we're going to talk about another important gardening basic, which is soil preparation. So David is over in our virtual garden, as we like to call it, that he can really show you some of these things up close.
Right, and I'm starting out here the vegetable garden, obviously, and we were talking about landscapes. What I want to talk about now a little bit is the soil preparation. At first, we were talking about surface drainage. When I talk about runoff that's coming from downspouts, from storms, from streams and stuff, that's water that's running over the surface of the ground, and that's absolutely imperative that we plan for that and that we select plants that are adapted to their environments. Now, the thing I'm transitioning now when I talk about soil preparation is the internal drainage of the soil. Soil that water also has to percolate through the ground, and this is one of the biggest problems, maybe even the biggest issue that we run into in gardening throughout our region, because our soils, they're predominantly clay. We've got these very old, I mean geologically old, highly weathered soils that are made up of big proportions of clay. And in some ways clay is good. Clay holds a lot of nutrients, it holds a lot of moisture, but one of the problems that we run into it is that these are tiny, tiny little particles, and they're flat. And then through the construction process, through walking, through time, they get compacted down. And when clay gets compacted down and squeezed down, it's so dense that it's very difficult for the air and water to infiltrate, to percolate through there. And the thing is, with the roots on the plants, the roots, they need that water, but guess what? They also need oxygen to breathe for respiration that's down there. So when we talk about the ideal, perfect soil, it would allow water to percolate through there. It would retain enough moisture so that to meet the plant's needs, but you would also have these pore spaces that hold enough oxygen for it to breathe. So one of the things that we end up having to do when we're establishing a garden is to go in and physically, mechanically break up this dense soil. Now what I'm doing here in the vegetable garden is obviously using a rototiller to go through, break that up. This is a cover crop. It's what's called it's hairy vetch. It's being tilled back into the ground, and it's what we call green manure. We're taking the organic matter that's produced by the cover crop and we're tilling that back into the soil, because as we add that organic matter back into the clay, it breaks down, it decomposes, it starts to form these more granular structures or aggregates that then allow air and water to infiltrate down into the ground. So what I'm trying to say here is, to me, the best way that you can improve clay soil is physically break it up, cultivate it, and mix a little bit of compost or organic matter into it. Now, when we're doing a whole garden bed, you might be able to go in there with a tiller and do it. But frequently we're in a situation where, say, maybe we're planting a tree. So one of the things that we do to sort of try to recreate this is, we recommend you want to dig this hole as wide as possible. You'll notice that it's not very deep, Roots on trees and shrubs and plants, they don't really grow down, they grow out more so than down. So that's why when you're digging, the first step, how you dig that hole is significant. Take that hole out wide, but no deeper than the root ball, so that that soil is broken up and we don't have those kind of compaction problems. After we've dug that soil out of there, then the next step that we're going to do in here is mix some compost in there. There's a lot of different ideas about this. There's discussion. There's people saying amend, don't amend. I'm sharing sort of what I based on my 40 years of gardening. When we're dealing with old, compacted, dense, rocky clay soils that have been through the construction process that most of us are dealing with in urban and suburban areas, I think it's very important that we take about 25% compost, 75% clay, and mix it back in there. Now there's a lot of choices there. We have the Merrifield planting mix, which we developed specifically for this use, and it's a mix of different types of compost. It's also enriched with organic amendments that its nutrients go, so that's a good one to work with. But it would be something like you see here, where we're taking that clay that's about 75% clay, 25% conditioner, stir that all back together, and that's what we use to amend back into the hole. So next is our final planting. This is what we want to look like at the end of the job. And the planting depth is very important. You'll see how this is sitting just slightly above the ground. When you look at a tree, it comes straight down like a pole, just like a utility pole or phone pole. And then you should see where there's a little bit of a root flare, where that goes out. That root flare needs to be visible. It needs to be right here at this soil line. If you have mulch that's piled up on top of that, soil that's on top of it, or it's settled too deep in the ground, then that bark starts to deteriorate. You can get decay organisms in there. Insects start to enter into the plant. You're not getting enough oxygen into there, and that leads to long-term problems that go on with the planting. So this we're talking about making sure you have this good surface drainage. You select plants that are adapted to the environment that they're in there. You make sure that you work the soil so that it has good internal drainage, and then we're talking about the proper planting. Of course, then it becomes your job to keep that plant watered. And keep in mind, this is like we try to tell you, you're taking a baby home. The root system is in that root ball. It has not had time to get itself established. So we're big believers in hand watering. We want you to direct that water right onto the root ball when it's there. Okay. What tends to happen is sometimes if the plant does get planted too deep, this is where we get into troubles, and I've got a couple examples to show you there. This is what we don't want to see. Again, this root flare is buried. It should be visible. And when this happens, the way the plant reacts is it starts trying to get oxygen, and it will start to form roots even up above that, what I call primary root system. So let's look at our next picture. And what would happen is, let's say this plant got buried too deep in the ground, and then we started seeing, this is the original root flare down here. That's the proper planting depth. This plant started producing sort of this secondary or tiered root system up as it was trying to get some air to breathe, trying to get some oxygen. So plants are tough. They want to survive. They're trying to adapt to their environment. But this is not a tree that's thriving. It's a tree that's just struggling along. And I see this happen all the time. And my next picture is one, it's a stump that a client brought me. They came into our plant clinic because the tree was not blooming. This is a dogwood. The tree had been in the landscape for 15 years. I started looking at the growth patterns, talking about the history of it. They couldn't figure out what was going on. I had them start excavating, looking for the root flare. And you can see this is a plant that struggled along in this ground for 15 years. This had that synthetic burlap wrapped around it. The roots never successfully got out into the soil. And so 15 years later, when this tree should have been at its prime, it was actually dying and had to be removed. So this is why I feel so strongly we got to get these basics right. And if you do that, you're going to have a garden that flourishes. It's going to be a joy. It's going to be a pleasure that gets better with each passing year. And if you don't, these are the kind of things that can happen. All right, I'm being told I have to stop talking and take a break. So we're going to do that, but stick with me, because when we come back, I'm going to try to tie all these pieces together in one good example. Welcome back, everybody, to Merrifield's Gardening Advisor. We're talking about the basics of gardening today, and we've talked again about drainage and plant selection and proper planting and watering, and I feel like these are really the things that we have to get right. I was just thinking during the commercial break last summer, I had a customer come in and was talking with her. She was new to gardening and saying, oh, that she can't do this, that the ground's too hard, it's not possible, and I just kept working with her and working with her, and finally got to the point where I told her, I said, then just go put the plants away, because if you're not willing to do this, then you're just wasting your time and money trying. So once she's challenged with that, she said, well, maybe I can do it. And you can, and you can. It's work, it takes some effort, but you know what, it's also so rewarding when you see the results come out. That's why gardening's still America's #1 pastime. So this is meant to encourage you, not discourage you. So I wanted to go through an example of like how all these pieces fit together. And I'm using my own garden, not because it's a beautiful or magnificent thing, but just because I'm there and able to document it and take the pictures. Now this is the before picture. I moved into just, a little townhome, moved into it in 2004. That's the situation that was there. And as we talked about, drainage was my #1 concern. You can't see it exactly in that picture, but mine is the lowest lot in the neighborhood. So the soil comes from, I guess, the surrounding properties. It all comes, it migrates down into my yard. There is no provision for it to go any place beyond there. And I do get water, literally puddles up, and then it ices over in the wintertime, so you know how that is. So one of the things I realized from the very beginning is I had to correct that problem. The other was the plant selection. All back here against the house was just literally, I found out there were a dozen, literally 12 azaleas crammed into that little spot. So essentially I was in a situation where everything had to go. So I started out recognizing I had a drainage situation to correct, and let's go through to our next step. So the whole process began by basically removing everything. Now I left this Coosa dogwood there. I had questions about whether I wanted to remove or replace it, but a couple factors worked into my mind. I thought, well, it's there. It's there. The other is it's not really my property. It was on my neighbor's yard, but I was willing to remove it and replace it if I wanted to, of course with their permission and stuff. But I thought this was something I could work with, and a little bit of pruning and stuff turned into a bit of a specimen. So in my situation, the first thing I did was to clear everything out. After clearing it out, I went through and established what were going to be my new landscape beds, and we'll just move through and see kind of step by step. So you can see where that same Coosa dogwood is. Now what I like to do is I use a garden hose, and I'm laying it out because with a garden hose you can play around, you can redefine where your new bed lines are going to be. But you move that around, you kind of adjust it, figure out, okay, this is where my bed line's going to be. At that point, you don't have to, but I actually went through with a can of spray paint to mark where the bed line, the new bed line was going to exist. And after defining where that bed line is, go through and I sprayed everything in that area with Roundup. So this is kind of where we're going through. So the old stuff's been removed, the new bed's defined, and again, I like to really work with the entire bed. I want the soil to be uniform, the soil texture and consistency be uniform and consistent through the whole bed. So this being a total renovation, I was able to do this. So I went in, killed everything, and then went to work on the soil. As I talked about, there's couple aspects to this. We need to make sure that I have some surface drainage, some place for all that water to go, because it does drain down into my property, and then also internal drainage to the soil. So this is a small area, so I just worked at it, turned it over with a shovel, broke everything up there. After turning and just all the dead grass, everything just kind of gets turned back into the ground. It's more organic matter. I added bunches of compost into it. And I still remember I was doing this in the middle of summer. It was 100 degrees out, and neighbors are thinking I'm wacky, but I enjoy it, and that's the only time I can work on it. And then after that ground is broken up, compost mixed into it, this was sort of end of what I'm going to call phase 1. But what I've done is, you can see that what's sort of a dry stream bed, I have downspouts coming in 2 corners, surface water from draining from the adjacent property, but I created an area for that water to escape from the yard, and I've also worked at and amended the soil. After this, we can start planting. So I did this and then went through and we'll look at the plantings. This is what I call my little baby plants, just starting out. You can see this is an Insularis boxwood forming a little hedge along there. I have a camellia that's started to spaliate and train against the one wall that's over there. And then perennials in here, because it's a small property. There's nothing here that's going to attain any size. So everything was planted. This was then, we're fast forwarding, this picture is probably taken around 2005, 2006. Then everything grows in. Again, now I'm kind of like this patient person, so I like putting little plants in and I enjoy watching things grow. We have a full range of sizes that's out there, so we can get you a quicker results if that's what you want. So this picture is taken, I'm thinking, like I said, around 2008, something like that. And then in the meantime, the Bradford pear tree on the other side came down, and I put in this new garden bed then just last summer. So I'm blocking the view. I'm trying to get out of the way, and I'm getting in the way. So I just want to say this nice thing, this garden, it's evolving over time. It's going to continue to evolve. But the thing is, we got those basics right of making sure that I've got the surface drainage, the soil prepared. I'm selecting plants that are going to stay small and not outgrow their area. And it's been a pleasure working on this through the years and years ahead. And that's really where we want you to go. So end of my time, and we'll go back to Debbie.
Thank you, David. Those are great ideas, and thank you for sharing those. Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to take your phone calls. So if you have any questions, please give us a call, 703-387-1046. We look forward to talking to you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to take your phone calls in just a minute, 703-387-1046. If you'd like to give us a call. Do want to mention all these great tips that David was talking about. We have come up with these wonderful brochures, so you can stop by any of our locations. We've got several of them that will give you all kinds of great information. We've got planting with confidence, water with purpose, watering your new landscape, lots of great things. And you can also access them on the website as well.
That's right, under our gardening tips and help function on the website. It's all there.
Lots of great ideas on our website. So our first caller today is Laura, who's calling from Bowie. Hi, Laura. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
What can we do for you?
I have a question about an amaryllis. I was given an amaryllis for Christmas in 2010. It bloomed. I took care of it. 2011, I got 2 more amaryllis, and all 3 of them bloomed very nicely. I put them outside during the summer. 1st of October, when the nights were starting to get cold, I brought them in and stopped watering them. The 2010 amaryllis, the leaves died down about Thanksgiving, so I cut them off and put it in the garage. And I was given another amaryllis this Christmas, so I started it growing and brought the one out of the garage, the 2010, and started watering it. It took a little while for the leaves to come up, and about a week and a half afterwards for the flower stalk to actually start coming up, and I was beginning to wonder if it would bloom. It has nice big red blossoms on it, but only 2, not 4. So I'm wondering, should I fertilize it more? Should I repot it? Should I put it in a bigger pot?
I would say, first of all, now that the flower was actually formed last year, which, you know, it seems like you're pretty well versed in all that. So the thing is, if you fertilize it, now, I mean, you're not going to be able to change the flowering now, but what I'd say is during its growing season this summer, you could increase the amount of fertilization you're giving it, you know, increase the growth on, which should give you larger blooms. Now, I would caution you, you can overdo it with fertilizer to the point where it's getting just so much vegetative growth that it comes at the expense of flowering. So definitely use something that's a more balanced fertilizer. Like, you know, I'd say our Merrifield flowering plant food would be a good choice. But you want those 3 numbers to be fairly balanced, not excessively high nitrogen. But it sounds like it's getting all the right care. And of course, it's during the summer when it's growing in its vegetative state. Just make sure that, you know, the moisture is somewhat consistent, not wet or dry. You could fertilize it once every 4 to 6 weeks, and then you've got it right on the dormancy thing as you start going into October.
Okay, it wouldn't be necessary to repot it, just fertilize it carefully?
They usually don't need a large pot. They can go even be fairly pot bound. Now, if I heard you, if it's been in the same soil, if it's been that same soil for about 3 years, then I would say, okay, then I think it's good to repot plants just every 3rd year or so, because the soil itself, the potting media, it breaks down, it decomposes, its structure changes and everything. So yes, I think in your case it would be worthwhile to repot it.
So once the blooms die, I should cut off the stalk and then take it out and get rid of the old soil and put new soil in and repot it?
Right. Now the ideal time, the perfect time to repot that is during its dormancy.
Okay.
But since we're playing catch up here, I'm going to agree with you and say, yes, that when it's finished blooming, let's go ahead and repot it. But just, you can kind of wash or rinse some of the old soil away from the roots, but you really don't want to injure or disturb the roots, particularly on amaryllis. That can set them back somewhat. So go ahead and repot it, this spring, or in another month when it's done flowering. But for future information, let's try to repot it during its dormancy.
Thanks so much, Laura.
Okay.
Have a great weekend. Okay, let's see. Our next caller is Allie, who's calling from Washington. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Oh, thank you.
I have what I believe is a quick question. I have several mature hydrangeas, which I'd like to move to a shadier spot. They go into terminal wilt during the summer. Would now be a good time to do it, or is there a better time of year to transplant them?
Good question. Right now is a perfect time to do it. You want to move them anytime between now and before their growth starts, which is usually in early April. So I know that the weather's been a little rough this past week, but it's supposed to be nice next week. You're just looking for a day when you've got the time and energy and the weather's good, and this is perfect timing to do it. Once that plant starts growing, once you see the new leaves starting to come out, that starts to put a little more stress on it. So try to get to it in the next few weeks.
Okay, and a follow-up question. I heard you recommend something called permatile, something like that you used as a supplement when you were planting shrubs and trees.
Yes, it's called Permatil.
Thank you.
Yeah, Permatil. That I use specifically if I'm having an area that is not well drained or plants that are sensitive to drainage. I think it's a fantastic product, but I don't use that as a sort of all-purpose soil conditioner. I use that only where drainage is really essential.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Take care. Okay, next is Walter, who's calling from Capitol Heights. Hi, Walter.
Morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Oh, thanks for giving us a call.
Thank you. I was watching the show, and you said when you got ready to put in your design for your flower bed, and you're designing, that you use ground cover to kill the top soil, the top foliage.
Yeah.
Would that interfere with the new plants that you're putting in?
Not at all. I get that question all the time, and I'm glad you asked it, but what happens, Roundup, the product I was using, and everybody is familiar with it, Roundup is just a total vegetation kill. It kills everything that's there. But the neat thing about Roundup is it degrades on contact with the soil. It's absorbed into the plant, and then it's basically within hours after hitting the soil, the microbes and everything digest it and break it down. So there is no soil residual left behind. So that's one of the few products that you can use for that and then just turn that back into the soil. Now there are other herbicides that do have a residual period and do have restrictions on replanting times. So it's a good question, but if you're using Roundup, the answer is no. You can go right back in behind that and do your planting.
Okay, the reason I asked that because I did that when I was putting in some azaleas in my front yard, and I was trying to kill some weeds weeds that was growing, and I did that in the azaleas died.
Now, if it's...
I didn't use Roundup, though.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, now, if it's sprayed directly on the plants, that could be a problem. Or, like I said, there are other products that definitely could have killed it.
Okay.
But if you're using Roundup and you don't apply it to the azaleas, then you would be okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the call.
Thanks. Have a great weekend. We're going to take a quick break and come back with more of your phone calls. Ah, the signs of spring there, those beautiful flowers coming out. Okay, let's get back to our phone calls. Let's see. Nancy is calling from Arlington. Hi, Nancy. Thanks for holding.
Good morning. Thank you. How are you?
We're great, thanks.
Just fine. Thank you.
I aerated in November and spread some seeds. I'm anxious, and I have a lot of weeds. I have crabgrass. I have looks like catnip growing all over the yard. Can I kill weeds now? Spray weed killer?
Kind of a yes and no answer. It totally depends on the weather. What you're going to need is you need at least a few days, I'm saying like 3-4 days, where the temperatures are staying above 50 degrees. Now, I'm always a little skeptical of some of the advanced forecasts and everything, but they're saying that this week the weather's supposed to be nice, so what you need to do is just watch your weather forecast. I'd like to see at least 2 or 3 days where we're talking about sunny weather, mild temperatures, even 55 degrees plus. I think you're probably a little bit early in doing that, but as soon as that weather cooperates, then the answer is yes. Because these weed killers, they're growth regulators. They disrupt cell division of the plant. So the weeds need to be actively growing for them to be able to absorb the weed killers or for them to be effective. So just watch your weather. Normally we're talking more towards March, but if we get a nice break and the weather allows, then go for it.
Also, one quick question. Should I pull weeds? Is it more effective to pull the weeds than to spray them and kill them?
Well, you could really go either way. The issue with pulling weeds is sometimes it's just overwhelming, the amount of them and the size of the garden. If it's within a reasonable amount of effort, and you feel like you can go out there and pull them, then I would say go ahead and pull them. Now, the other part of this that I want to say is what's really important for you, probably the most important part of this, is that you want to put down a weed preventer. Because what you're dealing with right now, these winter weeds, they're going to be dying off in the months ahead. But you have an opportunity to get ahead of this problem by putting down a weed preventer. And I'm going to say that can happen. You could do it now. This is a little bit early, but you want to do it no later than April 15. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that in the weeks ahead. But sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks, you'll definitely want to do a weed preventer. And if the weather permits, then you could also go out there and do a weed killer.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nancy.
Okay. Thanks for the call.
Take care. Okay, let's see. Catherine is calling from Ashton, Maryland. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Doing just fine.
Good. I have kind of a unique problem. Someone gave me a beautiful hoopside blue spruce that was only about 3 feet tall.
All right, well, that's not a problem. That's a
about
good
18
thing.
years ago. And someone has been putting dog feces around the tree to enhance the growth. They did not know any better. This was going on for about 6 months.
Okay.
So as a result of that, the tree has started to die. So they're not doing that anymore. About 1 inch or 2 of soil has been removed, but I really want to save this tree. Can you offer any advice how to mitigate what's already occurred?
There's not a whole lot that you can do. And this is going to be sort of a judgment call. That's why I'm even apprehensive about saying it. But if you start getting excessive salts, excessive fertilizers built up in the soil, the only way you can really remove that is what we call leaching, by watering. And then with time, with watering and time, that will drain through and sort of flush out the soil. My concern, though, is that blue spruce, you can overwater them, and you can get to the point where now you've just created another, perhaps more serious problem. So all I'm going to say is monitor the watering in there. You can pull a soil sample out of there, go down a few inches. It should feel like a damp sponge that's in there. So maybe check that out before you start to do anything. But sometimes a good watering or two can kind of help flush those salts out of the soil. But I don't want to create another problem with being too wet.
Okay, well, I'll certainly try that. Thank you all very much.
Yeah. Beyond that, it's just kind of, wait and see how the plant recovers.
Yeah, well, I hope for the best because it was a beautiful tree, and I'd like to see it last a long time.
Yeah, those are nice trees.
Good luck.
They really are. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Okay, let's quickly get Lori, who's calling from Fredericksburg. Hi, Lori, you there?
Yes.
Do you have a quick question? We're about out of time.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Okay, how can we help you?
I have a crepe myrtle, and I was wondering when I should prune it back and when I should fertilize it.
Well, you should prune it back right now, and I'm going to say that's sometime between now and mid-April, so sometime during the next 6 weeks is a good time to be doing your pruning. I might hold off on the fertilizing and do that, let's say, more towards April. But also, you know, we're going to have a pruning class coming up here in the next couple weeks, so check that out, and if you have an opportunity to attend, you might want to go to the class first.
Great. Thanks so much, Lori. I'm sorry we've run out of time, so hope you have a wonderful weekend. And thank you all for joining us. We hope we've given you some great ideas, get you started, because the season is upon us. So next week, we're going to get started again with getting started with some seeds starting.
Yep, spring's on the way, so we're going to start talking about growing stuff.
Absolutely. Take advantage of the seminars this weekend, and we will see you next week. Take care.